Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 16th, 2023 Worcester Township Board of Supervisors business meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? My name is Rick DeLello. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Lou Betts, who's our vice chair. To my right is Steve Quigley, who is our third member. Over on the side table, we have Wendy McKenna, who is here on behalf of our solicitor, and John Everts, who is here as our township engineer. On the back table is Sean Halbum, who is our township manager, and Amanda Lafty, who is our assistant township manager. First and foremost, does anybody have any informational items for the board?
This evening's meeting is being recorded for future video broadcast. Also, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session yesterday, August 15th, from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. to discuss personnel.
Thank you, Sean. I actually have a couple of informational items that I want to share first and foremost, and I'm kind of spraying this on you late, Wendy and Sean, but we will be having an executive session after our meeting this evening, very briefly discuss a matter of real estate, if you don't mind. I'll take just an FYI. Also, informationally, I'm sure folks have seen the signs and information, but I want to announce that a week from Saturday, as a reminder, is the Fire Department Chicken Barbecue that runs from 3 p.m. until they run out of the chickens, and they start selling tickets at 10 in the morning. It's obviously a great event every year. Used to be a fundraiser for them. Now it's more of just a community event for everybody to either come out to get some takeout or eat the chicken barbecue at the fire department. So, moving forward, first item on our agenda is public comment. We do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board this evening? Susan.
Where's the money part? Pay the bills.
Oh. Section. First section, page 2 there. Can you just make sure that the green light is glowing?
It is.
And if you can pull it closer to you so we can get you on the recording, if you don't mind.
Okay. I'm going to stand in the middle and move it like this so I can be heard.
You got to pull it a little closer because I'm not hearing you. If you
Can you
don't,
hear me now?
you just pull it closer to you.
Pull it closer.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. Now I can hear you.
All right. Good evening. My family, the Oliver and Rosalie Smith family, has owned a beautiful farm in Worcester for 65 years, which is now permanently preserved and will never be developed. When Worcester residents walk, bike, or drive down Fisher Road, they will enjoy the bucolic scenery of that farm. We sold our family farm home about 2 weeks ago, and a new young family will make it their own. While it was hard to say goodbye to the farm, it is comforting that it stands as a legacy to my parents' fervent belief that we are caretakers of this land for future generations, and preserving that bucolic setting will always be their legacy. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for buying the other farm on Fisher Road a year ago or so. You took decisive action to buy it at a good price, and it will now benefit all residents. I'm interested to know what the plans are and how the residents can be brought into the conversation as its best use. We probably can't satisfy everyone, but working towards a majority consensus seems like a good idea. And a strong thanks to you for deciding to purchase the Worcester Historical Society's Duchy Church to help the society out of the financial challenge of maintaining it while they continue to be of service to our community, preserving the history of Worcester Township. The museum they created in the Farmers Union Hall is magnificent, and I trust they will continue their good work with the Duchy Church as well. This is exactly the type of property that our township should be financially and supporting and preserving for generations to come, and I'm so glad that you all believe that too. Now, I'd like to turn my comments as an open letter to the Palmer family, who we all know is challenging the validity of Worcester's balanced and thoughtful zoning ordinance. Dear Palmer family, it's been
Susan?
on my mind to reach out to
Susan, you can't do that. You got to speak to us. You can't turn and speak to the audience. I appreciate that, but you need to kind of direct it to us.
Okay. I should have checked with you beforehand. Okay, this is an open letter to the Palmer family. Dear Palmer family, it's been on my mind to reach out to you for quite some time now. As the firstborn daughter of Rosalie and Oliver Smith, who both knew Steve and Nancy Palmer, I grew up in Worcester when we moved here in 1957. Donna Rothenberger and I used to walk along Valley Forge Road, picking up bottles to trade in for fudgicles at Allebach General Store down on Skipback Pike. Those were, I guess, the good old days. We enjoyed a lot of open space in Worcester back then. Even now, being surrounded by the beauty and rural nature of Worcester, its open pastures and green colors, it stimulates the imagination. I understand from one of my friends that her father and the late Steve Palmer were very good friends. Steve Palmer invited her father to visit Worcester, and he loved the area so much he moved and raised his family here. My girlfriend told me how grateful she is to have grown up here in Worcester, and it was all thanks to Steve Palmer. About 2 years ago, I became concerned about the zoning validity challenge that is being raised by the heirs and the Palmer children. I was surprised that there could be big box stores and lots of commercial buildings and businesses on your former farm instead of that beautiful open country look that it has now. This challenge is going to go on and on because there are many people who strongly believe in maintaining our current zoning we have in Worcester and have the money to continue to defend it. In a survey, residents said their number one concern was open space. Number two was traffic, both of which would be in jeopardy if your property was commercially developed. Therefore, the township and the residents are committed to defending our current zoning ordinance. I'm wondering if your family would consider returning to compliance with the current zoning for the property. That is, build very nice 2-acre homes that would lend beauty to that intersection and bring more people to enjoy Worcester. Or there's lots of ideas. Perhaps a vineyard could be planted on the ground near the intersection, and that vineyard could hold events in your former home and other special buildings on your property. Or maybe a farmer would want to buy it if it was affordable. Or would you be willing to approach the township, perhaps, and offer it at a price that the township could buy it, preserve it as open space with walking trails around your beautiful property, and perhaps build a community center in your historic home? I'd love to see it named the Palmer Community Center and be your family's forever legacy to Worcester. I know that the financial gain might not be as high, but is money really worth all the stress that this challenge must be causing? And what about the sense of fulfillment? And what about the sense of fulfillment it would give you to leave a beautiful legacy to Worcester for which your family, the Palmer family, will be forever respected and known? I'm speaking as someone who has lived in Worcester, loves Worcester, and I'm hopeful that you feel the same. I implore you and thank you in advance for your careful further consideration of working within the existing zoning ordinance of Worcester. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate your comments. Does anybody else have any public comment for the board this evening? Seeing none, we will move forward. First item on tonight's agenda is going to be the consent agenda. First and foremost, does any board member wish to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Do not.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda, treasurer's report, bill payment, July of 2023 of $681.86, and the July 23 business meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up, we have ordinance 2023-295, and this is Wendy, correct? Wendy, can you do me a favor and pull that? I know.
There we go. So this ordinance is the ordinance that was authorized at the July 26th Board of Supervisors meeting, and it is an ordinance authorizing the Board of Supervisors, the Board of School Directors of the Methacton School District to assume the hiring and oversight of school crossing guards for the public schools within the township. So I have a few housekeeping matters here. The first item is on July 26th, the Board of Supervisors did authorize our office to prepare and advertise the ordinance. The legal notice regarding the ordinance itself was published in a local newspaper on August 8th, 2023, which is required by the second-class township code. A copy of the ordinance was also sent to the law library on August 9th, and then the ordinance itself has been prepared and by our office, and as you recall, this ordinance is being adopted pursuant to the zoning decision regarding the Fairview Village Seventh-day Adventist Church to permit overflow parking on the church property by high school students of the Methacton High School. One of the conditions of that zoning relief was that a crossing guard would be installed there. Under the second-class township code, it is actually townships who authorize school boards to hire crossing guards, and then this ordinance provides that the school district will be solely responsible for the compensation of the crossing guard and all costs and expenses. And the school district will assume the hiring and oversight of school crossing guards. So that is the ordinance that you have before you, 2023-295.
Thank you, Wendy. Does any board member have any questions for Wendy regarding this matter? I know we discussed it last month and have sort of been discussing it through the process with the zoning decision on this matter.
I would ask Mr. Betts if he has anything, because he sort of spearheaded this whole thing. Lou, do you think everything's pretty much in line where we ought to be?
I'm glad that we got it through. It took the school 9 months to get its act together, and I'm glad we could get this through so the students could park 2 weeks from now for September school. So the sooner we get it done, the better.
Okay by me.
Sean, question, do you know how many total parking spaces that will now allow?
I believe it's about 50 additional parking spaces.
Additional parking?
More or less. It might be 48 or 52 or something like that.
Now, that's only for that top lot. I noticed before they were parking down below. Is there not a problem they park down below as well?
I don't understand the reference. You're talking about the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Right.
My understanding is that they're utilizing all spaces in that lot, which is about 50. And I believe the lot is both on both sides of Mill and Germantown, that is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Want to make a motion?
Forward, I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2023-295 for the school board to
And I'll
hiring
second that
the
motion.
oversight of the school crossing guard.
And I'll second that.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item up is going to be a waiver, and it's going to be a motion to approve a waiver of land development to allow for our BMP conversion at Terra Landscaping. John, Sean, or resident? How do we want to tackle this one?
John, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think the applicant should prepare, do you want to come up and speak about the project, or you just want me to read through what I have in my letter?
If you want to read through the letter, I will then give a small presentation.
Okay.
That sounds good.
If you would, when you provide your presentation, just make sure it's up here at the microphone so we can get it on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Chair. This is for North Grange LLC facility on 3481 Germantown Pike, also known as Terra Landscaping. The project proposes to convert an existing above-ground rain garden into an underground capture and reuse stormwater facility. It also proposes a new 6-foot-high stockade fence and an 11,460 square foot expansion of existing paving. The site consists of approximately 1.09 acres within Worcester Township and is located on the eastern side of North Grange Avenue within the agricultural zoning district. We prepared a letter and have approximately 8 comments that need to be addressed by the applicant. Do you want me to go through my comments?
Just at a real high level, John, if you don't mind mentioning, or just as the highlights of what
So this project received variances in 2010 and an updated variance list that expanded on those variances in 2022. Most of my comments are administrative in nature. The one thing that I would like to be clarified is what the use of the expanded paving and lawn area will be, and how essentially the stormwater management, or the stormwater will enter the new facility.
Yeah.
Good evening, all. Anthony Hiblin, consulting engineer for Fred Oskanian, the owner of Terra Landscape, located here at the corner of Grange and Germantown Pike. As you're aware, he's been operating there for quite a number of, almost going on 2 decades. Fred uses water at a fairly high rate. The project had implemented a standard detention basin, and at this point also has a roof collection system and cistern that he pumps stormwater out after collecting it and reuses it. It's one of the highest priorities on the BMP priority list for best management practices of stormwater. The project here was to propose that the actual basin itself could also capture rainwater runoff stored in an underground tank, and rather than releasing all of it to the waterways, he'll be able to use some of that in this tank, capture and reuse it in his operations. He does brining operations in the winter seasons and lawn applications in the summer seasons. That being the case, the project would place this plastic tank, if you will, in the basin and use the basin then as stone to filter that water before it comes into the tank. A small vault, if you will be placed that his pumps can then pump that through a filtration system into his trucks. With that, I've marked in red that portion of the site. One of the unique characteristics of this site is it is split between Lower Prov and Worcester Township. So marked here on the plan is a red outline of the new stormwater tank that will capture all of the shed area that was going to the surface basin. The basin itself, between that tank wall, if you will, and the basin side slope, would have capacity at 40% in the stone. So the 100% capacity of the tank, 40% capacity of the remaining area surrounding that, and the filtration from above to feed that. There are also several inlets at the surface that used to go into the basin. They are now directed into the tank as well through his capture and filtration. Above the tank, there is an expansion of parking lot that I've shown in a darker brown color that would be paved, and that extension is approximately 40 feet from the edge of the current pavement. Again, all of that surface runoff also leads into the tank. All of the other parking areas also go to the tank. The roof of the light building, and those are located in Lower Prov, do currently go to an underground tank, which is located and existing between the building and the new tank, and that will remain in operation. The perimeter of the site will have, we are proposing added landscape buffering trees and shade trees. And I believe as we were discussing this with the Planning Commission, we have a storage bin that's just to the north of the township division line. That storage bin for mulch and gravel will be relocated back to the Lower Prov side, as it was not part of the approval for that storage use, outdoor storage use. That sums up the waiver. There's no new buildings proposed at this time. And Fred can explain to you, beyond that pavement area, the stone capture area, which he can maneuver the trucks and vehicles and equipment around to utilize this stormwater.
So Anthony, before you step away, I guess what I'm hearing is you're making really an enhancement to the stormwater capabilities from what was a rain garden environment to sort of move to a best practice in how you're now capturing, but you're also going to reutilize some of that as well. So invariably, it's really more of a site improvement that's taking place so that you can take better advantage of the stormwater so that Fred can reuse it, but you're not in any way impacting any of the runoff, and maybe this is a question for John as well, that there's no, we're not at all concerned that we're going to create any additional, because we're capturing it, there's not going to be a runoff problem or any concerns in that regard, and this is considered a best practice now in terms of stormwater management.
That's correct.
Okay.
When we initially proposed the roof many years ago, I learned that it was one of the first and only recapture systems. Although it's the highest priority, it's not being done a lot. And in this county, this was one of the first ones that the staff over there processed such an application. So when we sat with them and discussed this expansion of the capture system, they were thrilled, and it still is one of the very few. There are a few of them out there in Montgomery County. But I'm happy to be part of this project, and
Sure.
It's been a real pleasure working with the County Conservation District to implement this as well.
Does anybody have any questions for Anthony while he's...
Anthony, a quick question. What's the volume of, what capacity can you hold? And two is, if you get a tremendous rain, what happens when it gets full? Is there a runoff there? How do you handle that?
Certainly. It still acts as a rate control basin if
Basin,
it
okay.
completely fills up before Fred can tap into it. And it has it exceeds the actual capacity that it used to have because of the volume equation that I designed the tank to. I do have the actual cubic feet volume. Let me grab that for you.
Just, sir, if you would, anything not said into the microphone won't go onto the record. So I think it was 106,000 gallons, you said capacity? Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
You have a total storage of approximately 30,873 cubic feet in the stormwater management report.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's comparable to what the rain garden was previously. To answer your question, there's a storage volume that's below an orifice. So that water will stay in there, and then once it gets to a certain elevation, it will exit as it originally did through the rain garden. It'll go through storm sewer that exits out towards the street.
You mentioned, Anthony, you mentioned about the use. What are the uses that the landscaping company uses this water for? Just general spraying?
Yeah, I'll let Fred give you a little
Okay.
more detail, but he mixes his own brine in the winter months with the stormwater for applications, and then during the summer, he uses it for applications on lawns.
Okay. Thank you.
Anthony, are all of our comments in our letter will comply?
Yes. I have had a chance to review the engineer's letter, and that would be, we would comply with those comments.
There are two additional admin comments that I would like to add, if that's possible. Since there was zoning relief given in 2010 and 2022, we would like the waiver land development plan be recorded. I don't think it needs to be signed by anybody, just to be recorded at the courthouse to, cement that the variances were and what the conditions were. And the other one is that once that conversion of the BMP is started, that somebody from the township inspected the construction.
Are you both comfortable with those adjustments?
I'm not sure what the first one meant, but the second.
The zoning relief grant would appear on the plan.
It's just recorded at the courthouse. Yeah.
You're talking about the one from 2010 and 2022?
Well, this plan here, because it lists all the variances and the conditions on it.
Okay. That's fine with me, John. I certainly appreciate that, and as long as you guys are comfortable to comply with all those, then that's certainly,
They got half them on already, so I'll put together.
all right. Fair enough. So Fred, why don't you just cover, just real quick.
One other question I can ask. We've worked for a number of years with your company there. You're one of the few properties in the township that we have agreement with our neighboring township across the road. And usually you go before them and have all the boxes been checked on their part. If there's any interaction in this project, there's no problem with Lower Providence.
Fred, you need to come to the mic if you don't mind, just so we get it on.
My understanding that since the rain garden is on the Worcester side and this is all on the Worcester side, that
They have no problem. I know sometimes they voice their concerns one way or the other, so, okay,
no concerns.
thank you.
My turn?
Sure, if you've got questions.
I think it's a great project you got going on there. You have one retention pond, I guess, holding tank originally. Now you're adding another one, and you're using the water. That's a great idea. The only thing, and then again, John's going to cover it, is it's that 100-year rain game when it rains really bad, and it's going to bleed off into the storm sewer. I think that's the only concern, that as long as John
Yeah,
whatever. It's just the neighbors down the street. So as long as it, and the 100-year rain issue, nobody's going to punish anybody for that one. That's nature. But as long as it's designed correct, John thinks it's a good thing and everything's good, I'm all for it.
great, thank you,
Did a lot of work.
thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Betts that I think it's really good. You put rain gardens in, and it's really a place to capture the water and doesn't do much, but you're really doing the next step, and I applaud you for that, that we're actually trying to use the runoff for another purpose. And certainly, the brining is important, and I didn't even think about using it for the brining, but that's good. So
No, it is
I think it's a
extremely
job well
creative.
done. Yeah.
I mean, you don't even stop to think about how much water that is, and then you're reusing it, and you're sort of serving the purpose of stormwater management, and then you potentially have a business application that takes advantage of it, which, two birds with one stone, if you will. But from my perspective, certainly I think it sounds like a great project. I applaud you, as Steve said, for starting with the rain garden. It is funny because back in the late 2000s through about 2013, the county, everything was rain gardens, rain gardens, rain gardens. And it's funny to hear that, not everybody sort of raced to do that ultimately. So it's good to hear a success story with a rain garden ultimately. From our perspective, guys, we need to have a motion and a second, unless you have more questions.
This is a curiosity question.
Okay.
The tanks are below frost line, right? So they're not going to freeze.
Right,
So I'm just as a curious thing. So if it gets cold 3-4 days in a row, things freeze. You're below 36, so the pumps are going to pump water. Nothing's
right.
not going to overflow. Or,
Problem with any
I'm
of
just
that.
curious. I'm sure it's well designed.
We don't get additional when the surface is frozen.
No, I get
When
it.
it melts, it comes back in. But the tank water has never frozen.
Is this a plastic tank? I'm just curious.
The
think-
first one, were those plastic or?
The first one were concrete tanks.
Concrete tank.
They were pieces that we stacked on top of each other. And this would be like an impermeable membrane, I guess, something like milk crates almost that are filled with.
It bleeds into the ground somehow, some of it? Or no?
We're actually allowing some to bleed into the ground, but the tank itself will be impermeable, so it will retain.
Be captured.
It's a great
Right.
idea. I mean, sounds like this is what you do. That's great. As long as John's okay with this, I'm ready to go.
All right, then you're in charge of the motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve a waiver for land development for BMP for Terra Landscaping.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor?
Conditions?
So we're going to back up just a hair, okay? So,
We have to make a motion with approval with the conditions from CKS Engineering.
any more language there, Wendy? You good? Okay,
Go with that.
Second that motion.
okay. It's been moved and reseconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. It's a great project. It really is.
All right, next up, so Wendy, do we need to do these individual? It looks like we have three. We could do a collective motion. Okay, so let me just, give me 1 second and I'll hand it over to you. We're going to have three motions tied to the Valley Forge Road Corridor Deed of Dedication, and we've done a number of these over the last few meetings, and it's all yours, Wendy.
Right, so these are, as you said, regarding the Valley Forge Road improvement, the Valley Forge Road Corridor Improvement Project. So we have a motion for acceptance of the deed of dedication executed by MB Investments for 1224 Valley Forge Road. The next is a motion to accept the deed of dedication signed by Michael S. and Rebecca Current regarding 1251 Valley Forge Road. And then the third is a motion to authorize the execution of a temporary construction and access easement and accept the deed of dedication for street right-of-way signed by John Mackel and I always say it wrong, excuse me.
McAlley.
Yes, of 2979 Township Line Road. Sorry, 2972 Township Line Road.
Okay, so you,
We're going to go through that, and so I'll make a motion that we approve the Valley Forge Road corridor deed dedication for the MB Investments, the Michael S. and Rebecca Current, and the temporary construction and access easement for John P. McAlley, Township Line Road.
as articulated by Solicitor Wendy McKenna.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think before we do this, I think it's important, as we've discussed in the past, to tell the people the road and why we're doing it with the stormwater management. I think a lot of people just think we're taking this land, but I think it's important to understand the slope. So if you can explain that, I think to the people that are watching, it may let them understand why
Right.
we're need the land.
So there's really a few pieces, Steve. Ultimately, when you take a look at a road like Valley Forge Road, there's we're trying to address collectively issues with the traffic that now comes up and down Valley Forge from both directions. It's a lot of pass-through traffic. It puts a lot of wear and tear on the road, and it's a big deal to fix it. It's a slow and sort of arduous process, and part of that started with a grant of $700,000 for the engineer to look at the road and find, so first it was the step of saying we need to find money to do that. And we went out and found the money to sort of look at the road and say, how can we enhance and improve areas that are problematic? There was also a traffic light at Woodland that was discussed as part of the project. And as you go through the design phase, part of that is looking, as you sort of wind down Valley Forge, there's left side and right side decisions to make. There's the intersection of Township Line and Valley Forge and Stump Hall on the other side, which has sort of all, we were discussing it recently, there's all sorts of water runoff that comes through there and washes out the area regularly, particularly with the violent storms we've had over the last couple of months. That's a good example of how quickly it sort of deteriorates there. So when you're looking at it, you have to sort of figure out what's the best way to not just improve the road to the traffic, but also how do we handle stormwater management? How do we make sure that it's safe at all of those intersections, creating turn lanes so it's a cleaner move for the traffic. And one of the outcomes is the need to take small little slices of land along the way so we can build the road properly, ultimately. And these we go through a process with the residents, and this has taken almost 2 years of communicating with the residents and sharing with the residents what it is that we're doing, and ultimately why we need those little small slices so that we can build the road correctly, and we can also sort of meet the requirements of making it a safer road and also improving stormwater management and the other components. So it's not Big Brother coming and saying we want to take your land. It's a mechanism of trying to say what's the best way to build the road, what's the best way for us to make it safer, what's the best way to sort of enhance stormwater management up and down that section, and trying to solve multiple problems all at once. So it's, to your point, it's, when we get around to these decisions where we're sort of accepting a deed of dedication, it's, a resident has made a decision to say, yes, I accept and understand why you're doing this, and ultimately, we've taken great care to work with any resident that had questions, that wanted to sort of understand more fully. We've taken steps to sort of make sure that we're, minimum disturbance in any property, adding buffers and other things to sort of help make sure we satisfy each resident's concern and requirements. And I applaud the township staff who have done an exceptional job, and Bob and Wendy from the solicitor. I mean, it's a slow and tedious process, but I think they've done an excellent job of really trying to do the right thing, but also make sure we're taking care of the individual residents along the way.
You just want to add and put it on the record that it is a Pennsylvania PennDOT road, and we are working with PennDOT and Montgomery County. more so PennDOT. It's their project. It goes through our township, so then we
So we're sort of the caretakers to that.
cooperate and work with them, so. Do we need a motion? We did motion.
We have a motion, if you...
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. So next up is going to be a motion to enter into settlement for a tax assessment appeal for the following address. It's going to be 2106 Burks Road. Wendy?
Yes, so this is a settlement agreement, as you said, for a tax assessment appeal. The property owner is Kyung Si Lee, and the taxing authority will remit to the property owner a refund in the amount of $11.90. So that is the township's portion of the settlement agreement.
Sure, and just to Steve's point, I always sometimes forget we have an audience that's sometimes watching these. So these assessment appeals typically have much bigger impact with the school district and the county in terms of how our tax dollars are allocated. And we've said it before, we'll say it many, many times, for every dollar that somebody is taxed on a property, we're getting a penny at the township level. So the bulk of that is going to the school district. There's a small portion after that's going to the county. We still strive to be the lowest millage in the county at Worcester Township. We're very proud of that fact. I mean, it's sort of a running joke to say a penny on a dollar, but certainly our piece of that translates to $11 and some change, but ultimately that's sort of a process which we still have to participate because we are in fact accepting a tax dollar and we will be accepting $11 less as part of that settlement. Does anybody else have any questions for Wendy on this?
Make a motion to approve the settlement for the tax assessment appeals, Kung Si Lee at 2106 Burks Road, $11.90.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next up, we have other business. Does anybody have any other business they wish to bring before the board tonight? Moving forward, next up, we have one additional public comment. Does anybody wish to make any additional public comment to the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, then motion to adjourn. Thank you all for coming.